you. Thank you. Thank you. Your patience with that short delay. Welcome to the September 16th, 2025 City Council Work Session Meeting. Our meetings are public and you are welcome to join us in person or by watching from the Council's agenda page on Zoom, YouTube, or on SLC TV. We hope you'll continue to join us in whichever manner you feel most comfortable. Today is a work session only meeting during which there is no public comment, but please join us on October 7th during our 7 p.m. formal meeting to share your comments. And we, of course, welcome your feedback anytime by mail to P.O. Box 145476, Salt Lake City, Utah 84114-5476, or by email at council.comments@slc.gov. Or also via our 24-hour phone comment line, 801-535-7654. Lehood, am I correct in that the October 7th meeting is also off-site at the Sorensen Unity Center? It'll be our West Side meeting. So please do join us for our October 7th meeting, but not here in this building at the Sorensen Unity Center. Comments we receive on agenda topics are shared with all council members and posted to our website, slccouncil.com. The first item on our agenda is item number 1, an ordinance designating a local landmark site for the Samson Altadena apartments. We have Brian Fulmer here, Council Policy Analyst, to give us an introduction, and then Noah Elmore, and I see Daniel Echeverria here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a proposal to designate the Samson and Altadena apartments on the southwest corner of 300 East and 300 South as a local landmark site. The buildings are located in District 4. These buildings were listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 2010, but that listing does not provide protection from demolition that a local landmark designation would. I'll let you know the applicant is with us and would appreciate an opportunity to address the council. Now I'll turn it over to Noah.
Thank you. This is a request by the Samson Altadena Condominiums Homeowner Association to designate the Samson and Altadena apartments as a local landmark site. Next slide, please. The subject site is located at the southwest corner of the intersection of 300 South and 300 East. Samson Apartments is to the north at 276 East, 300 South, while Altadena Apartments is to the south at 310 South, 300 East. The site is presently zoned RMU, but will be changing to MU8 in October. Next slide, please. The period of significance of the buildings is 1906 to 1945, from the date of construction to the year the Samson family sold the property. The brick Samson and Altadena apartments are early examples of apartment construction of the time, which saw the typical apartment block configured as a 3-story walk-up with 2 units on each floor, flanking a central staircase. The buildings represent high-style examples of neoclassical architecture and apartment block construction. The buildings are 2 of 25 extant examples of walk-up apartments built between 1903 and 1915, with twin apartment buildings being rare in general. Both buildings have been listed on the National Register, and their particularly noteworthy elements include deep porches and the neoclassical architectural ornamentation, with the brick and stone masonry of the buildings, which has been remarkably well preserved, especially when compared to similar apartment blocks from the period. Next slide, please. The standards for the designation of a local landmark site are evaluated based on historic significance, historic integrity, eligibility on the National Register, and established planning practices. As discussed in the staff report, staff evaluated each criterion against the proposed designation. It is in staff's opinion that the proposed designation meets each standard. Next slide, please. It was also found that the standards for a map amendment have been met, which are based on whether proposal adopts plans, policies, and the zoning ordinance. Additionally, it was found the proposal will have a minimal impact on surrounding properties. Next slide, please. Both the Historic Landmark Commission and the Planning Commission have forwarded positive recommendations to City Council. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Council members, are there any questions for staff? For this? Okay, I'll just clarify. So this is a local landmark designation, and just because this is part of, I think, the conversation that's led up to this, can you, do either of you feel prepared to just give the public and us a little bit of an understanding of the difference between local and national registered landmark sites?
So being listed on the National Register doesn't offer protections in the same way a local landmark site does. So for example, if they currently submitted a permit for, say, replacing windows, we would have, as a city, there would be no protection on the historic elements of those windows. Whereas as a local landmark site, the building is afforded certain protections to maintain historic character-defining features.
Okay, great. And then we also recently passed an ordinance, I think, that gives local landmark sites some protection against overly tall construction adjacent to those properties. So that is applicable to these. Thank you. I think we have Annie Isaacson here. Would you like to speak to the council? Feel free to come join, and then we generally give 5 minutes for any applicant to speak, and then there may be follow-up questions.
There is a model of our slice of South Center City neighborhood. If you want to see it, this is a little model of our two buildings that we're really proud of. I want to take this opportunity to thank, first of all, planning, Noah and the team for processing the application and answering our questions. They gave us a little challenge, which we were afraid of, that ended up giving us a gift. And that was that they required that we get every single owner of the building, 17 owners, to agree to this application, which according to our CC&Rs, we don't have to do, but we had to do it for the city. And we thought there's no way we're going to get 17 people to even respond, never mind agree on it. But because they forced us to do it, we feel that it was a real gift, because that is the one thing, for whatever people's beliefs, politics, religion, behaviors, they all agreed that they wanted this building on the local historic registry, and that was a gift for us to find that out. And thank you for that. The other thing is, you guys have seen us at planning before, you've seen us at city council before, and it's before we were fighting to get all the national buildings the same protection that you're about to give locals. And thank you to a lot of you on city council for taking the time to meet with us in person or online and explaining to us and basically saying, no, you have to do the local app. We're not going to give every national building this because they're not permanent. And thank you for doing that, and that's what brings us here today. I just want to quickly tell you, I'm a career architect. I was coming to Salt Lake City to be a full-time artist and let go of architecture. Unfortunately, I saw these pictures of this building online, and I fell in love with this building in Salt Lake City. And it's made me be here for 8 years and do nothing but try to fix and restore and fight for this building. So this is kind of a long way to get here. I'm going to go advance the slides really quickly. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, so if you go to the next slide, you're going to see Octavia, Samson, 120 years ago. He was a big deal at the church down the street, which is also historic. He built this building for his family to live in and for members of the church. So at that time, people from the same church, the same religion, they weren't Mormon, they were other Christians, all had a place to live that was respectful and beautiful. Now it's full of people from all different faiths, religion, cultures, ethnicities, and we're all living together in the same household, and we want to be a lasting legacy for this city, and that's why we're here today. Next slide. We have August Rosdine. He gave us a beautiful building. We spent a lot of money, almost $750,000 for people that don't have a lot of money to restore the brick, and we're not done yet with all the work we need to do. Next slide. Okay, and this is a picture of the church where the people that lived there were from. Next slide. I'm going to go through these quick. And this is just, it's part of the history. So as these new buildings come up, and it's great, we're adding density, more people can live here, it's becoming a very popular place, but we want to retain the history. So let's go to the next slide. We're going to go to the preservation. Next slide. So yeah, from 1906, $21,000 paid for the whole building, okay? We've spent in the last 5 years almost $1 million on this building, okay? And it keeps coming. It's very expensive to do this, and we're not rich people. We do it out of love. Different things draw us here. We asked you to come and help us make this a lasting legacy for the building. I was blown away and shocked that we got unanimous decisions at both Historic Landmark Commission and Planning Commission, and we got beautiful letters from people in the city about our application that I don't even know. So I'm here today to ask you to support this application. The other members of the board will be here October 7th to make comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie. Council members, any questions for the applicant or comments? Councilmember Young.
Yes, thank you. So I think I just want to share the thanks as well with you, as well as the rest of the HOA. I know that there are certainly times where the city processes can seem unclear, and I'm aware of what those experiences were for you historically, and that in those moments of encountering what can feel like a very bureaucratic process, we do see a lot of individuals kind of throw their hands in the air and be like, we're out. And I think it does just demonstrate your commitment to your community and to your buildings, and the fact that you were not going to take no for an answer. And you were like, nope, we're going to figure this out, and we're going to persist and pursue. And I think you see the outcomes of that persistence in both the Planning Commission as well as the Historic Landmark Commission's feedback. So I am grateful for you because I think that you demonstrate that what that commitment can translate to in terms of, a potential uniting conversation within your community. And I'm grateful that we have that opportunity to point to the amazing work that you've put in and your commitment as an example to others in the community who may be trying to consider whether or not to pursue this, that you're just a success story, and I'm very grateful for that.
I think Councilmember Lopez Chavez, did you have a comment?
Oh yeah, can you hear me okay? They
Yes.
said there was issues. Awesome. Well, no, I just wanted to say thank you to Annie and the Central City Community Council who's been persevering on this issue. I think my colleague said it best, that this is an example when our community is seeing the different erosion of buildings that need these advocates. And in this case, Annie is the advocate for the Samson Altadena, the HOA, but also other historic buildings in the downtown. I think this is a great example for this council and cohort to look to rectify this process and to understand it in a way where we can use this to preserve other buildings. So I just wanted to say thank you again, and I look forward to working with Annie, Lauren, other individuals from Central City that are looking to continually preserve our downtown buildings. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. I'll make a comment. I appreciate also, Annie, your perseverance with this, and also planning staff's work in helping shepherd this through the bureaucratic process, as we call it. And I'll just state, just for the public and for the record, I would support us. I think this is a win for our city because we don't have a lot of historic buildings in Salt Lake City, and we don't have a lot of historic buildings that are preserved in Salt Lake City. So I think for us to add more of those to our local landmark register is a positive. It's a win for your building because it also puts some step back restrictions on new development that probably will happen in close proximity to your buildings. And so I think that the more we can have these sort of local pieces, as our city grows, we're seeing a big trajectory. I think the more we can have those new buildings mixed in with historic buildings, it makes a richer city and a better sort of just human scaled experience walking through our city. So I appreciate that. And I'll just state for the record that I would support us looking at other zoning incentives for local landmark buildings as they seem appropriate, as we're looking at different ordinances that may give additional protections or benefits or incentives to other buildings to to become registered on the local landmark register, because we haven't seen a lot of those, at least in my time on council. I think for much longer than that, we haven't had a lot of new local landmarks created. So I would be supportive of other incentives like this that sort of is the one that compelled your group to join the local registry. But I would also look at the process if maybe we don't need 100% of those. There's a legal reason why you do, but I would be open to looking at the process of making it a little bit more streamlined as well, if that seems appropriate. It's a little bit above my personal experience, so I'll look to planning staff on those things, but I'd be open to those conversations. Council members, any other comments? All right, so the tentative schedule for this is that, let's see, we'll accept public comment on this on October 7th, and then tentative council action is scheduled for October 21st. Thank you for being here. All right, so moving on to item number 2, which is an informational update relating to the Avenues Community Plan. All right, so we have at the table Council Policy Analyst Kate Warrett, and then Amy Thompson and Riley Hall from the Planning Division.
Great, thank you. So there is no action being taken today. I just want to start out with that. This is the first informational meeting for you from planning staff as they work on the Avenues Community Area Plan. They are about a third of the way through their process. They'll go into more detail on that. But Resolution 14 of 2020 states that they need to come to you at different points in the plan creation for your feedback and approval. So today, the main goal is to receive the existing conditions report, review the calendar and framing document, and support the public engagement process. They'll also be looking for your input, ideas, and suggestions, and any concerns on key plan updates moving forward. I included a couple policy questions for you to consider in the staff report. Those include potentially balancing the needs for housing in the broader community versus the neighborhood's character and historic preservation. Also asking or determining what large city budgetary items may be anticipated to be included in the plan. Additionally, what significant changes may arise, and then how this plan may address the Foothill open space access and collaborate with the Foothills Trail Master Plan. With that, I'm going to turn over to planning.
Thank you.
All right. Riley and I are here to brief the council on the Avenues Community Plan update. Next slide, please. I think Kate gave a good overview of the purpose of this briefing, so we'll go on to the next slide. So this plan was identified for an update because it's the oldest community plan we have in Salt Lake City. It was last adopted in 1987. The plan has served its purpose. There were policies and changes that were accomplished from the plan to address the priorities at the time of its adoption. The intent is to develop a plan that's focused on land use, links the land use to policies with other plans, such as Plan Salt Lake and Housing SLC, various transportation plans, and identifies key action items to implement the land use plan. We envision a plan that is easy to use, direct, can be implemented, includes metrics to evaluate success, and is set up to be updated on a more frequent basis than what is currently happening. This plan will update the vision for the community through 2035. Next slide, please. This slide highlights the role that community plans play in the larger framework of citywide plans and goals. Community plans build on those city policies and initiatives established in plans such as Plan Salt Lake. Because each community and neighborhood is different and unique, each one's going to carry out the planning goals in its own unique way. So housing solutions, for example, in the Northwest area are going to potentially look different than housing solutions in a community like the Avenues. Next slide, please. This slide outlines the general processing steps for plan updates. We are right in the thick of analyzing the data and drafting initiatives and policies for the plan update. Next slide, please. As part of the plan update, we've published an existing conditions report that's available online on our project page. We're just going to go over a few highlights from the existing conditions report. Next slide, please. This is the plan area in the context of our other community plan boundaries. The area of the plan is approximately 3,000 acres.
We have a question from Councilmember Young.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm just curious how we determine those plan areas in terms of like how do you get to be a community that gets a community plan?
I actually don't know exactly how these boundaries were determined.
Nick Norris, Planning Director, has an answer for us.
So most of these boundaries were determined decades ago when the city made a shift from having a citywide general plan to the community plans. I think that happened in the 70s. And so we've just kind of carried them over. Over time, we've added some. For example, the downtown plan was pulled out of the central community plan and made its own. And some of the boundaries haven't made sense, and so we've tweaked some of those. But there's no real rhyme or reason otherwise for that. So,
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next slide, please. This is just a quick snapshot of the demographics. Things vary pretty widely among the avenues, so we ended up breaking down the information based on census tract. The Avenues is home to about 8% of Salt Lake City's population. A high percentage of the population has a college degree. Median income is fairly similar to that of Salt Lake City as a whole, with the exception of one census tract, which is the North Census Tract in the dark blue. Next slide, please. This
Sorry,
map,
can you go back and repeat that? What were you talking about? Median income?
Yeah, so the median income of the Avenues is fairly similar to Salt Lake as a whole. So the line there across the graph represents the Salt Lake
I see. Okay,
AMI, but there's one census tract, which is that farther north census tract, where it's just over 200, it's 250,000 plus. So I guess sky's the limit in that area. So we ended up separating them out just because it somewhat skewed the results of the AMI overall. Next slide, please. This is a map that's helpful to visualize the development periods and the avenues. So nearly half of the buildings were constructed before 1920, and this is reflective of a historic development pattern that predates the city's zoning regulations, which first came to be in 1927. This is especially true for the lower avenues below 7th Avenue. The light teal color is what represents structures that were built before this time period. Next slide, please. This is a map of the historic districts in the avenues. There are 3 historic districts that fall within the avenues. The first is the Avenues Historic District itself, which is entirely within the avenues. There's also City Creek, which borders it on the west, and then the north side of the South Temple District is within the avenues. The solid portions represent areas that are within the local historic district, so those are locally regulated, and the areas that are just hatched are within the National Register District. These boundaries largely overlap, with the exception of the northern boundary of the Avenues District that just comes slightly north of 7th Avenue, and then slight portions of the City Creek District on the west. And the area also has a number of individually listed sites, 45, and that includes individually listed landmark sites or National Register properties. Next slide, please.
The majority of the land area in the Avenues community is zoned for residential or open space. Open space is largely occupied by the foothills as well as the city cemetery. Mixed use, institutional, and commercial each make up about 1% of the land in the plan area. Next slide, please. The majority of the housing types are single family, followed closely by apartments at 39%. Almost all of the apartments in the plan area are located in the lower avenues. As you can see on the map, the lower avenues has more diversity in terms of housing types than the rest of the avenues community. Next slide, please. 100% of all households in the avenues are within a 15-minute walk of a park, trailhead, or the city cemetery. Other notable parks in this neighborhood include Popperton Park, Memory Grove, and the 11th Avenue Park. The avenue's foothills also provides direct access to a regional trails system that includes the Bonneville Shoreline Trail and the City Creek Canyon Trails. Next slide, please. Daily traffic volumes are highest along South Temple, 11th, 3rd, and 2nd Avenue, and B, E, I, and Virginia Street. There are existing bus routes throughout the avenues. Routes along 9th Avenue and South Temple are part of a frequent service network. This means that the bus stops along those roads are served every 15 minutes from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m., Monday through Saturday. The bus route traveling along 11th Avenue and Virginia Street is served every 60 minutes, and along 3rd Avenue, bus stops are also served every 60 minutes. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Public engagement for the project is generally divided into 3 main categories: opportunities and issues, which took place during spring and summer of this year; big ideas, which we are in the middle of now and will continue through fall of this year; and the final vision category, which will take place over this fall and spring of 2026. Each of these categories includes public engagement opportunities, and we recently kicked off the public engagement for the Big Ideas stage by presenting some of the highlights and draft initiatives at the Avenue Street Fair this last Saturday. Next slide, please. Now I'll talk a little bit about the public engagement we've done so far and highlights from the feedback that we've gotten. We have held 6 in-person events at various locations throughout the community, including at Smith's and Memory Grove. At these events, interactive boards were used to collect public input on various topics, including housing, transportation, parks, and the local economy. We've held 8 stakeholder interviews with various community members, including those from the Greater Avenues Community Council, business owners, and other residents. The project has an online open house webpage to provide information to the public on the status of the plan update and upcoming engagement opportunities. An online survey was created to gather feedback from Avenues residents. In total, we have had 265 survey responses. The feedback gathered from the initial community engagement will be analyzed on how it aligns with the existing community conditions and relevant citywide policies. And the common themes that are identified will be used to inform the goals and policies that will shape the updated plan. Next slide, please. In general, neighborhood residents greatly value the neighborhood's historic character, walkability, and sense of community. 95% of survey respondents rate quality of life in the avenues as good or very good. When asked about the most important issues facing the avenues, participants identified housing costs, transportation safety and access, and the lack of neighborhood-serving businesses and amenities. Other areas of concern include the redevelopment of the LDS hospital site and lack of bike infrastructure. Next slide, please. Since the Avenues is an established neighborhood, public outreach related to housing aimed to identify the preferred strategies for increasing housing units while preserving existing homes. Feedback from all engagement shows that the Avenues residents love the historic character of their neighborhood and the architectural variety. So new development will account for that while allowing infill development where possible. The most popular strategies for adding housing units include adaptive reuse of existing buildings, new mixed-use development, and infill development by allowing different housing types in certain areas. When asked about the preferred infill development types, duplexes, townhomes, small single-family, and small-scale multifamily containing 4 to 9 units are the preferred types of infill development. I would like to note that all of these housing types already exist within the Avenues community. And in addition to identifying preferred strategies and types of housing, the community emphasized that any new development should be in scale and compatible with the historic nature of the Avenues. Next slide, please. Community engagement related to transportation issues aim to understand the community's perspective on safety and access in the Avenues neighborhood. Speeding and unsafe intersections are the most frequent safety concerns, and other areas of concern include the lack of bike infrastructure, pedestrian safety, and public transit frequency. Next slide, please.
So public feedback overwhelmingly mentioned historic preservation and historic architecture as one of the key attributes in the Avenues. When asked about the historic preservation overlay requirements, common responses were that the overlay has helped preserve what so many people love about the Avenues, which is the buildings. Many also expressed a desire for flexibility when it comes to repairs or updates. There was also feedback that some are not as familiar with the requirements and they are unsure of what they can and cannot do. Additionally, we heard comments about the new construction review process and resulting projects from that. Other preservation topics that have come up are related to the city cemetery, as it is an important asset, as well as incorporating historic preservation into placemaking elements, whether that be signs or plaques or historic information throughout the community. Next slide, please. Because 100% of households are within a 15-minute walk of parks, engagement for parks related to what we could do to make existing parks more usable space, or what amenities people might want in their parks. Most common answers included maintenance, shade, lighting, safety improvements, play elements, restrooms, and drinking fountains. Although not necessarily associated with parks, another common answer we heard in relation to this question was the desire for more community garden space in the community. Next slide, please. Engagement for commercial uses focused on amenities that people would like to see more of throughout the community, as well as preferred locations for commercial uses. Commercial locations were pretty spread out in terms of answers, having about the same percentage of responses. The top ones were spread throughout the Avenues, on corner properties, clustered with other commercial development, and then specific corridors, such as 3rd Avenue and E Streets were the top ones that came out of that bulk of answers. Next slide, please. Next slide, sorry. Going back to the engagement timeline right now, we again are through the initial engagement step and we are at the big ideas phase. As Riley mentioned, we did attend the Avenue Street Festival this weekend and presented some of what we've heard from the community, as well as some draft action items for the plan update to address what we have heard. We will be scheduling some additional in-person events throughout the end of September and early October, and also publish this information online and send it out to people that have signed up for email updates on the project. And then from there, we will draft the final vision that we will also send out for feedback and go through essentially these same similar steps. Next slide, please. And that is all we have prepared for you, but we are happy to take any questions or love to hear any feedback that you have.
Council members? Councilmember Young.
So this is all very interesting to me, just because it's the first time that I've had the opportunity to go through a community plan process. So I really appreciate you taking the time to kind of lay the groundwork of like what the comprehensive process is and where there's opportunities for feedback and for input. As a part of that, I think one of the things that's interesting is that in a lot of ways you can see those themes, but you can also see conflicts within those themes, you know, so you have individuals who are saying like, we want to see, you know, safer streets. You also have individuals who are saying like, I would like to see less street calming. And you're like, well, wait a second, like, how does that both go together? So is there, I'm just curious about how the process like lends itself to neighborhoods being able to have that dialogue so that it's not just whoever wrote the most Post-it notes, but instead like that there's that opportunity to kind of understand the trade-offs related to some of these conversations.
Yeah, and I think that's largely where our overarching citywide plans and policies come in, where there are those conflicts. And we have heard that exact conflict actually, where people are wanting traffic calming and then some are not wanting traffic calming. So trying to balance that with adopted transportation policies that we have, this is largely going to be a land use plan. And so any policies related to transportation or parks or trails are largely just going to be supportive of those existing adopted policies. So hopefully by looking to those overarching policies and plans, that will help guide us in terms of what direction we need to go if there's a conflict.
I love it. Thank you. And then just one more follow-up question. So I was also at the Avenue Street Fair, like over the weekend. And I think one of the key questions that I heard from a lot of the residents was related to obviously the large LDS hospital property. Mm-hmm. So can you just clarify where the city has a role related to that property and where we do not? Because I think that that's an important distinction to make. Like in a community plan, for example, we would not have the authority to be able to say, like, this has to be used in XYZ explicit ways in the future. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so the vision document, which is the plan update, it's not the law. It just guides future development. City doesn't own the LDS hospital site, and we're not sure what will be happening with the LDS hospital site, and that's what we've heard from the owners of the LDS hospital site. One thing that the plan can do potentially is address future land use designations. And we did present a draft of a future land use designation at the Avenue Street Festival, specifically identifying land uses on LDS Hospital. I think that's somewhat the extent of our control of the property.
So the biggest role the city would have is right now, I think almost most of the property owned by Intermountain Health is zoned institutional or an institutional zone that unless they adaptively reuse the buildings, they would have to go through a zoning amendment process. It's very, very possible. In fact, I think it's likely that at least some portions of it will be adaptively reused because it's a very expensive demolition. And so if that's the case, then they, under our adaptive reuse ordinance, they can basically convert it to a new use without necessarily having to go through our process. But the zoning piece is where the city has the most leverage.
Perfect. That's super helpful. Thank you for clarifying that for me. And my last note, I just want to really thank Councilmember Wharton. I know that he has been such a staunch advocate for, getting this process underway and really moving us forward. And just really appreciate the opportunity as a fellow council member to be a party to the process so that we as well can also be better advocates in future processes that may involve our districts. So thank you.
Yep, thank you.
I have a couple questions. First, I guess a comment. I really appreciated the data that you started the presentation with, and looking at that, I think we were both kind of shocked by the more than 50% of the buildings were built before zoning existed in Salt Lake City, which I think is, I might be hearing what I want to hear from that comment, but I think it's really interesting because I think one of the things that I love about the Avenues, and what I think a lot of Salt Lakers love about the Avenues, is that it's so unique. There's a variety of housing types even on the same block. There's smaller lot sizes and a little bit more density, but still like human scaled buildings. And I also love about the Avenues that there's a lot of neighborhood commercial, like corner shops and restaurants that are mixed in with neighborhoods more than we see, I think, anywhere else in the city, or really the state for that matter. So I'm wondering if within that data you have, or there's a way to look through how much is non-conforming in terms of what is currently built. And if we find out, my guess is that probably more than most neighborhoods, if most of the buildings were built before zoning even existed, my assumption is that a lot of the buildings are non-conforming with current zoning. And I wonder if there's a way to look at, as we anticipate things like LDS hospital redevelopment or other parts of the Avenues potentially redeveloping, does our current zoning encourage the things that we love about the Avenues? I also will state that I think that the LDS hospital redevelopment site is an opportunity for something a little bit different than what we see in the Avenues. So I would not want something that says it must look exactly like what's in the Avenues, because I think we're going to end up with something that feels inauthentic and kind of fake and new. So I think even a large site like the LDS hospital site within the Avenues is an opportunity to add even more diversity into the construction stock, building stock within the Avenues. But I'm kind of intrigued by this idea of more than half of the neighborhood was built before we even had ordinances, and we all love that neighborhood. What are some things we can learn from that? And what might that exist? None of those are really a question, but if there is a response or anything like that. And I will turn the chairship back over to Chair Wharton. Thank you.
I mean, we didn't do an exact deep dive into how many non-conforming uses or parcels there are, but that is something that we looked at, particularly with the engagement that we had for the street festival this weekend, is to just show what is existing in the community, what does housing already look like. And we took an example block and showed that density looks a lot different in the Avenues than it does other places. And we had pictures of all the existing houses on the block to show how many units were in each of those houses or buildings. And I think that went a long way to help the community understand, like, they already have a lot of what we're looking for in the housing plan in terms of broad housing types and mix and density. So in terms of just age, I think a lot of the lots are undersized in the Avenues. I don't know how many of them. I think it would take a tremendous amount of time, just because it's not just lot size, it's, you know, the building and how far it's set back and looking at all of that. But they're definitely, the setbacks are different. The development pattern is different, and it's reflective of that earlier period of time.
I guess part of the reason why I'm asking those questions are related to the R1 zoning updates that we may be talking about at some point. But I think there are a lot of neighborhoods that look at the Avenues and say, gosh, I wish my neighborhood was a little bit more like the Avenues. And I think a lot of that is related to the fact that we don't make it legal for us to build like we have in the avenues. And I would love to learn, of course, taking modern safety and welfare issues into mind, but I would love for us to figure out how to encourage more of that type of development, especially with neighborhood commercial and a variety of housing stock. So I have a separate question, which is a lot of times with neighborhood plans, we assume that the next step is going to be potentially rezoning of a lot of things. Is that something we're assuming here, or is this, how are we going to use this plan when it's done? Because I guess I don't look at the avenues and think, gosh, the zoning's broken there like I do in some other neighborhoods, but maybe it is. I don't know. I'd love your thoughts on, does this spur a big rezone effort?
I think there could be some changes that come out of the future land use map and the plan update that would warrant zoning changes, but the avenues is largely built out, and that's something that we've acknowledged. And so any change is going to be a very small change in the avenues. For example, something that we talked about this weekend with the community is just adding in some more neighborhood commercial zoning for neighborhood commercial uses. And what we did was we looked at all of the existing non-conforming buildings within the avenues, and some of them are not zoned for that use, so they're existing non-conforming uses. And if we were to designate them as a use that's appropriate for what's currently being operated, that would result in a nice sprinkling of commercial uses throughout the neighborhood. But in terms of just large wholesale zoning changes, that's not something that we're looking at this point. There's definitely an area below 7th Avenue that currently has blocks that are closer to a moderate density land use designation. And so that might be something we look at where right now apartments in like an SR1A or an R15 zone, that's not a housing type that's allowed, but those all exist in the lower avenues. So just legalizing existing housing is something that we would potentially look at, and that may result in some changes to the zoning.
I do, but I wanted to give others an opportunity to go first. Okay. So my question is that I think a lot of the avenues has a lot more than what people would assume. I think a lot of naturally occurring affordable housing in terms of rental space. Mm-hmm. And I wonder how we account for that when we don't really, that's kind of a label that like we assign. It's not like an official label. How do you know how much naturally occurring affordable housing there is in a particular area? Is there any way to like estimate that, and if so, how would we do that? And just because I think that a lot of the plan is kind of premised on that, the housing portion, and I'm wondering if there's a way to quantify that at all. Do you see an opportunity to do that?
It's really hard to do that without access to a lot of that data. And because in the avenues, a lot of the rental units are the smaller properties, there's not a lot of good information that we have access to about how much they're actually renting for and how much they cost. And so when you look at like the reports that are put out by various apartment associations and things, they're usually larger apartment buildings, and they don't include these, especially when they're small, locally owned, and they're not reported. So it's really hard for us to come up with policies or actions to address that from the cost side. But what we do look at is how do we protect those types of places with various zoning tools. And so I think this gets back a little bit to the question that was asked about the degree of zoning changes that will happen. I think most of those will be aimed at ensuring that most new development that happens in the avenues is appropriately scaled infill, so that we have the smaller units, that they're not displacing through demolitions, particularly in the lower avenues where most of those probably are occurring below, also happens to be in the historic district. So I think those are the tools that we would likely be able to use to help achieve that goal the best we can.
Okay. I mean, how else would you get that data? Just ask people, poll people, and ask them to voluntarily give it?
The only way is to get those property owners to disclose it some way.
Okay.
We do, through some land use applications, ask for that information, but we can't necessarily, and it might be useful for informational perspective, but we also don't want to cross the line of using that to establish some zoning rules that start getting into the area of being considered rent control, which we can't do. So
Right. Okay.
If Scott, if you can go to slide 8, it has some demographic information that does show the different income levels for different census tracts. While it doesn't directly address rent,
Right.
I'm guessing based on the income, it can be inferred where that naturally occurring affordable housing may be located.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, and then, so walking around the avenues and spending, time there and in Marmalade, it's, which I've done since childhood, but I am still finding things that I didn't know were packed in there, and still finding homes that I always assumed were single family and end up having multiple dwellings. Is there any way to know how many houses present as single family but are actually multi-dwelling? Do we have an idea of that?
that would probably require more of windshield surveys where we're looking at our known density data per property and basically making a judgment on what it looks like.
Okay.
I think it's challenging to do that. We can look at it where we compare land use codes with the county with our known data stuff and zoning and get a general idea, but it's not going to necessarily be, there's a high degree of error in doing that kind of stuff.
Like you can't just go off of house numbers or something and okay.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because there's some very creatively addressed
Yes, there are.
as well. So, which is, I mean, actually part of the reason why it's so cool. But other question, or the other thing I just wanted to kind of reflect that I've heard a lot from constituents is there is a lot of concern about that LDS hospital property and what that could be. And I'm sure, if you polled Avenue's residents, ask 5 residents what they would like to see there, you'd probably get 6 or 7 opinions about what should go there. I think everybody has an opinion, but there is a lot of concern about turning a property like that into a large neighborhood commercial district, I guess, that concerns residents just because there's already, so many parts of the avenues that are residential parking and where they really require on-street parking, and whether or not that could be something beyond what exists in the avenues now. If it was bigger than that, whether that could be accommodated. So yeah, I don't know how to formulate that into a question, but there are certainly those I wouldn't even call them a full node. It's a little cluster of maybe 3 or 4 businesses together, and I feel that works most of the time. But a lot of times, if you added just a few more cars, it suddenly would not work. So when we're talking about neighborhood business and encouraging more neighborhood commercial, I want to keep that in the forefront of everyone's mind, that we are talking about much narrower streets that are already full on just a typical day, And then if there was a bunch of additional traffic, that I feel like we could be creating a lot of problems for ourselves. With the LDS property, I mean, I think I know the answer to this too. Did you have anything on my first point that wasn't a question? My non-question? Is there any feedback on that? You don't feel like you have to.
No, I think I think we agree with a lot of what's been said. I think there's some realities about the Intermountain Health site and the LDS Hospital site as a whole, because it is big, right? Multiple blocks and everything else. And so I think that one of the things that we've heard is focusing on those kind of a neighborhood scaled business node. But there's a reality that this is not going to just be neighborhood scale buildings, right? There's just no way economically that's going to be the outcome. And so how do we achieve that? For example, and I think I mentioned this before you walked in, but there's a high likelihood that a portion of the LDS Hospital will go through an adaptive reuse, just because the demolition is so expensive. And so if that happens, how do we make that so that it becomes, those spaces are available, and the site also has a lot of open space on it. How do we preserve that? And some of those open spaces are used for parks by nearby residents. And so how do we ingrain that? The benefit that we have is that the site is zoned, I think, a combination of institutional and urban institutional.
Yeah, urban institutional, the center, and then surrounded by institutional.
So they'll have to go through a zoning amendment unless they adaptively reuse everything. And so that's I mentioned earlier, that's the spot where the city has a lot of leverage on how we determine how that impacts and fits into the neighborhood.
Right, because I mean, like, if it was going to be used as, one thing that they've said openly that it could be is like an outpatient specialty hospital. So they wouldn't need a rezone for that, right?
That's right. That wouldn't even be a change of use.
Yeah, but even if they use the existing building, or substantially part of it, the minute that it changes to housing or anything like that, that is not allowed under institutional.
So they can utilize the adaptive reuse to convert existing qualifying buildings to residential.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. So they wouldn't need a rezone necessarily.
For that, that's right. But if there's other things, because some of the other properties likely aren't going to be able to go through that, that those would be areas where the rezonings would likely happen.
I see.
On those surrounding properties, I guess they could also do affordable housing incentives if they didn't keep the buildings in institutional.
Right. Okay. And then my next question is about how this master plan and the trails plan are going to kind of work together, because we have seen. I love that the trails are so easily accessed by the neighborhood, and people come from all over to go up those trails, which is great, but we know that use is going to continue to climb, and a lot of these trailheads, you're going already basically between two people's backyards and two people's houses, or how do we create access points and like plan for those access points when it's already built out around the trailhead so much? Where do you add parking? Where do you add bathrooms? All those practical concerns. So, I'm sure the answer is yes, that the plan is going to take all of that into account, but I just want to ask that question as well.
So yeah, the plan will take all of that into account, but in I guess, relation to the existing adopted policies that we have related to those plans, so our trails plans, our reimagined nature plans, it will be in line with that. So it will support already adopted policies related to those. There may be other things that we identify from the community specific to the avenues related to trails. For example, some of the engagement that we've heard is kind of the mismatch or conflicts between different types of users of the trails. So whether that be people on bikes or walking a dog up a trail, and just the desire to have maybe more of a like alternating days. I think the plan could address those types of things, but the bigger things will rely on our already adopted city policies.
Yeah, one of the other aspects that if those plans, like the trails plan, doesn't, I know it identifies a couple of new trailheads, but if there's others out there that come out of this process, then we can put those in a plan. The benefit of doing that is that if those properties, typically they're undeveloped or they're next to, they're big properties that maybe they subdivide. If we have those in a plan, we can, our subdivision code does require people to actually dedicate at least an easement for those trails. So that's how we can get better access. And that's how we've established a number of trailheads in our foothills. So.
Okay. I think that's it. Well, what's one thing that you heard, sorry, what's one thing that, some feedback or something you heard from the public at the street fair, or maybe in comments that has surprised you?
We were surprised that it was so positive, honestly. I think we got a very positive response, and maybe it was just the way that it was said this time. I think we really tried to listen to the community members and some of the feedback they gave us, just about acknowledging some of the things that are already existing in the neighborhood, like the mix of housing types and those types of things. So we really tried to build off that. So I'd say just how positive the response was from the very beginning was really surprising to us. I don't know if there was anything else that you heard.
That's great. I love hearing that. I mean, I had talked with residents too that day, and the feedback I kept getting was, it seems like with a lot of the other changes that the city's done in other neighborhoods, you're trying to make them more like the avenues in terms of like allowing housing to be added to back lots and having, you know, thoughtful density and different housing options. Like, let's not, like, we should keep the avenues being avenues-y if we're trying to copy the avenues in other areas, and try to keep that, keep the good vibes going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. Oh,
Mr. Chair, I just want to circle back to
yet another question.
I know,
We're pretty much equal now at this point in terms of the amount of questions we've asked. So you go ahead.
I know that this isn't really the point of a neighborhood plan. It's to look at that neighborhood and think through the future of that specific neighborhood. But I just keep thinking this is an opportunity for exactly what Councilmember Wharton just said, is us potentially finding ways, like this research that you're doing right now and this engagement. It feels like a really good opportunity for us to find ways to bring those things that that residents of the avenues love, the 95% positive survey, to other parts. I would love more neighborhood commercial in Liberty Wells. I think that that's one of the things that I covet about the avenues, is these little restaurants. And maybe there's a way that we could look at, okay, this is the size of restaurant that does not create a traffic issue and does not create a whatever, and we say we just allow those in residential districts up to 1,000 square feet, 2,000. I don't know what the number is, but maybe there's a way that we can say small commercial is just more allowed throughout the city. I would love for the scope of this research to help inform the rest of the city as well. And I think that the mixture of housing types we've talked about a lot, right? And we've done research, and I think we're moving in a really good direction with that. But it's the mixture of housing with small scale neighborhood commercial that maybe is a great opportunity for us to learn a little bit more and push a little bit further on. So that would be my hope for this. You have a lot of smiles, so I'd love to know what those mean.
I mean, it is definitely something that we're looking at. One of the things that we presented to the community on Saturday was just on 4 different topics, and one of those was economy, and where, I don't know if you were in here when we talked about this earlier, but what we did was we looked at existing non-conforming businesses and where those were, and potentially mapping those to be appropriately zoned for what's already being used. But another idea that we presented to the community is just this idea of accessory commercial units, and that maybe that could fill some kind of gap where it could just be a space where there's a lot of houses that have like little stores attached to them. This is also the case for Central City type area and all over the city, but really specifically in those areas, and it could allow for just rental of an art studio to somebody, or just more local businesses to have space in those smaller scale areas that are already established in the neighborhood, to help fill those gaps where maybe a mixed use zoning per se is not appropriate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be great. I mean, there's like, sorry, go ahead. Oh. Yeah, because there are, I can think of probably 10 of those between Avenues and Marmalade that are there, and most of them don't have that commercial component. But there are some that do, and I think they work great. There's one by my house, antique store, super cute. Sarah, any more questions? You had a lot. You had a lot to say too. It's not just me. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having us.
All right. Thanks, everybody. All right. Oh, thank you. We're now on item number 3, which is a written briefing, and that brings us to our standing items. Report of the chair and vice chair. I don't have anything to report, and I think our vice chairs had to step off. So, staff?
I'm here, Mr. Chair.
Oh, you're here. Oh, I'm sorry. I can't see you, so I thought you were gone. Do you have a report?
I don't.
Oh, well, fine then. Staff?
Just a quick announcement. A reminder that on your next council meeting on October 7th, as Councilmember Mono has mentioned, will be West Side at the Sorensen Community Center. Both the work session and the formal meeting, dinner and some entertainment will be provided for members of the public who may be listening and want to come join the council on the 7th. That's all.
Yes. Great. All right. That concludes our work session today, and there is no formal meeting, so we're adjourned. Thanks, everyone.